There is a version of you that shows up to work, to family dinners, to first dates, to every room that expects something from you. It has the right posture. It says the right things at the right volume. It knows exactly how much of you to reveal and how much to keep sealed shut. And somewhere along the way, you stopped noticing you were performing it. That is not dishonesty. Almost everyone does this. Jung had a word for it. He called it the persona, borrowed from the Latin term for the mask actors wore in ancient theater. Not a lie exactly, a necessary translation. The self, adjusted for public consumption. The trouble was never that the mask existed. The trouble is, what happens when you forget you're wearing one? Think about how it started. A child learns quickly which parts of itself earn approval and which parts earn silence or worse, correction. The anger that made an adult uncomfortable. The sadness that was met with irritation instead of comfort. The strangeness, the intensity, the too muchness that got smoothed over with a look, a sigh, a change of subject. None of this required cruelty. Most of it happened in ordinary homes, delivered by ordinary people who were only repeating what had been done to them. But the child learns the lesson anyway. Show this, hide that. And by adulthood, the hiding has become so fluent it no longer feels like hiding. It feels like personality. This is the strange mechanics of the mask. It doesn't sit on top of you like a costume you can remove at will. It grows into the muscle. You laugh at things you don't find funny so consistently that you stop registering the gap between the laugh and the feeling beneath it. You agree with opinions you don't hold so often that you lose track of what you actually think versus what simply keeps the room comfortable. Most people call this being agreeable. It is something closer to disappearance. There's a particular kind of exhaustion that has no clear source. Not the tiredness of physical labor, not the fatigue of a bad night's sleep. A deeper kind. The tiredness of a person who has been managing an impression for so long they've forgotten there was ever anything underneath to manage. If you have felt this, you already know it doesn't respond to rest. You can sleep for 10 hours and wake up just as depleted because the thing draining you was never physical. It was the mask, running quietly in the background, all day, every day. Here is something worth sitting with. The persona was never designed to express you. It was designed to protect you. Somewhere, early you calculated, without ever consciously deciding to, that the real version of you was not safe to bring into certain rooms. Too much feeling, too much need, too much difference from what the room expected. And so a second self was constructed carefully, instinctively, to stand in front of the first one. A diplomat, a translator, a shield shaped like a person. For a while, this works beautifully. People like the diplomat. The diplomat is easy, accommodating, low maintenance, pleasant in exactly the ways that make other people's lives smoother. The diplomat gets invited places. The diplomat gets praised for being so easy to be around. Nobody ever asks the diplomat how it's doing, because nobody realizes there's someone standing behind it. There's a moment that happens to almost everyone who has worn the mask long enough, and it rarely arrives with warning. You're in a room full of people who know you well, people who would say, if asked, that they know you completely, and a wave of something close to loneliness passes through you so suddenly it's almost dizzying, because you realize none of them know you at all. They know the diplomat. This isn't their failure. You built the diplomat precisely so they wouldn't have to encounter anything harder. The diplomat was engineered for smoothness, and smoothness by design has nothing underneath it for people to trip over. There was never anything to misunderstand, because there was never enough of you actually present to be understood. That's a strange kind of grief. Grieving something no one else even knows is missing. Jung wrote about this with unusual bluntness for a man of his era. He said that the persona, however necessary, is ultimately a mask that hides the real nature of the individual, and that identifying with it too completely produces a kind of quiet catastrophe. Not a dramatic one, a slow one. You wake up one day midlife, sometimes mid-career, sometimes mid-marriage, and realize you've spent decades perfecting the art of being liked by people who never met you. They met the performance. This is where most people either look away or begin, however reluctantly, to look closer. Consider how differently people respond to you depending on which version of you shows up. The diplomat gets warmth, but a strange, conditional kind. The moment the diplomat falters, the moment something unscripted leaks through, a flash of temper, an unfiltered opinion, a need that wasn't supposed to exist, the room tightens. Not because the room hates you, because the room had an agreement with the mask, not with you. And you signed that agreement so early and so quietly that you don't remember agreeing to anything at all. People don't resent your authenticity. They resent the disruption of a performance they'd grown comfortable with. This is the part that's difficult to hear, so it's worth sitting with for a moment before moving past it. The people closest to you may have, without any malice, been rewarding the mask this entire time. Every compliment about how easygoing you are, every relief expressed when you didn't make a situation difficult, every subtle cue that told you the smoothed-over version of yourself was the one worth keeping around. You learned the lesson they were teaching, even if they never meant to teach it. Behind the mask, something else has been living this whole time. Jung called it the shadow, though the name has been so overused in casual conversation that it's lost most of its precision. It isn't simply your dark side, in the cartoonish sense people now use the word. It's everything you excluded from the persona because the persona had no room for it. The anger you weren't allowed to have, the ambition that seemed unbecoming, the grief that made people uncomfortable, the appetite, the intensity, the refusal, the need. None of it vanished when you buried it. It just stopped being conscious. And what stops being conscious doesn't disappear. It waits. This is why so many people experience sudden, disproportionate reactions to small things, an overwhelming irritation at a minor inconvenience, a wave of sadness with no identifiable trigger, a flash of rage that seems to come from nowhere. It isn't nowhere. It's the shadow, surfacing briefly, because the container built to hold it, the conscious mind, the persona, was never designed with enough room. You've been living in a house with a locked room, and every so often something inside it knocks. Consider what happens in the moments the mask slips, even briefly in front of another person. Say something too honest at dinner, cry somewhere you weren't supposed to cry, refuse something you were expected to accept without complaint. Watch what happens to the room. There's a flicker of discomfort that passes through people, quick, almost imperceptible, before they recompose themselves and change the subject. Most people never register that flicker consciously, but you do. You've spent your whole life reading rooms, so you catch it every time. And you learn again the same lesson you learned as a child. Put it back on. This is the quiet tragedy of a well-constructed persona. It doesn't just fool other people. Eventually it starts fooling you. There's a particular kind of person who becomes so identified with their mask that they experience something close to panic when it's threatened, not because they're being dishonest, but because they've genuinely lost track of where the performance ends and the person begins. Ask them who they are without the role, without the reputation, without the version everyone has come to expect, and you'll watch something close to fear across their face. Not because the question is unfair, because they don't know the answer. Jung considered this one of the central dangers of modern life, long before modern life had reached its current pitch of performance. He warned that a man who has identified himself with the persona too completely believes himself to actually be what he pretends to be, not lying in his own mind, simply confused about which self is real. This confusion has a cost, and the cost is rarely paid all at once. It's paid in installments, a slow accumulation of moments where you said yes instead of no, agreed instead of objected, smiled instead of grieved, all to keep the performance intact. Each installment seems small in isolation. Together, they add up to a life that technically belongs to you but doesn't feel in the quiet hours like it was actually chosen. Most relationships don't end when the mask finally cracks. They end long before that, quietly, the moment both people privately agree to stop expecting anything real from each other. Here is something that rarely gets said plainly. The mask was never optional, not entirely. Some version of a persona is necessary for anyone who has to function inside a society, a workplace, a family. Jung himself never argued for its abolition. He argued against the fusion, against forgetting that it was ever a mask to begin with. The goal was never to walk around without one. The goal was to remember your own face underneath it. But remembering requires something most people spend enormous energy avoiding. It requires turning attention inward, toward the room you locked, toward the parts of yourself you excluded so early you no longer register the exclusion as a choice. It requires sitting with material that does not flatter you. The envy, the rage, the hunger you were taught to be ashamed of, the tenderness you were taught was weakness. Nobody does this by accident. You have to want to know what's behind your own face, and most people, if they're honest, aren't sure they do. There's a specific kind of fear that arrives the moment someone actually begins this work, and it rarely resembles what people expect. They think they'll find something monstrous, some hidden cruelty, some unforgivable impulse, some proof that they were right to keep it locked away all along. What they usually find instead is something quieter and somehow harder to face. They find how much of themselves they gave away just to be tolerated. This is where the shadow work stops being an abstract concept and becomes something closer to an excavation. You start noticing, with uncomfortable clarity, all the small surrenders. The opinion you didn't voice because it would have made someone uncomfortable. The anger you swallowed so many times you no longer recognize it as anger, only as a persistent tightness in your chest that you've learned to call something else. The need you buried so deep, you now mistake its absence for contentment. None of it went away. It just went underground and started running the show from there. Jung believed that what we don't bring to consciousness eventually appears in our lives as fate, and that we call it fate simply because we cannot see the mechanism producing it. The relationships that keep repeating the same wound with different faces. The career that keeps recreating the same invisibility you swore you'd never accept again. The pattern that feels each time like bad luck or bad timing or the wrong people. It is rarely any of those things. It's the locked room, expressing itself the only way it can. Here is the part that tends to reorganize everything, once it's actually felt rather than simply understood. The parts of yourself you buried to survive childhood, or a marriage, or a workplace, were not defects. They were often the most alive parts of you. The anger was information. The hunger was direction. The refusal you were never allowed to voice was, in its way, a kind of integrity, an unwillingness to accept something that shouldn't have been accepted. You didn't bury weakness. You buried a self that was inconvenient to the people around you. And you did it so early, so completely, that you mistook their comfort for a description of who you actually were. This is the moment the frame rotates. What looked for years like your own flaw, your own excessive sensitivity, your own inability to just let things go, starts to look like something else entirely. Not a flaw in you, a mismatch between what you actually are and what your environment was able to hold. The mask was never a lie about you. It was an accurate report of what the room could tolerate. Two very different things, and once you can see the difference clearly, something shifts that cannot easily be undone. You start to notice in real time the moment you're reaching for the mask out of habit rather than necessity. The smile forming before you've checked whether you actually feel anything like it. The agreement forming in your mouth before your own opinion has even had a chance to surface. You start to catch it. You cannot stop the reflex immediately, but you can no longer do it unconsciously. And that difference, small as it sounds, is the beginning of everything that follows. Consider for a moment what it would actually mean to remove the mask completely, not gradually, not selectively, but all at once, in front of the people who have only ever known the performance. Most people flinch from this thought before they finish having it. Because underneath the flinch is a suspicion they rarely say out loud, that if the mask came off entirely, there might be nothing there to hold its shape, that the diplomat wasn't hiding a person so much as substituting for one, that decades of managing an impression may have hollowed out whatever the impression was supposed to be managing on behalf of. This fear is almost universal and almost always wrong. What's actually underneath the mask is not emptiness. It's simply unfamiliar because it hasn't been given room to develop in the open. A muscle that's been immobilized for years doesn't disappear. It atrophies. It needs to be used again before it remembers its own strength. The same is true of whatever self you set aside. It isn't gone. It's undertrained. Jung called the process of reclaiming it individuation. A word that sounds clinical until you understand what it actually asks of a person. Not self-improvement, not the acquisition of new, more impressive traits. The opposite, really. A slow, often uncomfortable process of becoming who you already were before the persona was built, to protect that person from a world that wasn't ready for them. This is not a comfortable process, and anyone who tells you otherwise is selling something. It requires you to disappoint people who benefited from your compliance. It requires you to sit with the discomfort of others when you stop performing ease you don't feel. It requires tolerating the specific loneliness of no longer being universally liked, because universal likability was never a natural state. It was a symptom of a self small enough to offend no one. Most people don't leave individuation feeling triumphant. They leave it feeling, for the first time in a long time, accurately sized, not smaller, not larger, simply their own dimensions, instead of the dimensions the room required. There's a particular quality that develops in people who have done this work honestly. and it's almost always visible before it's ever explained. A stillness that isn't passivity, a directness that isn't aggression, an ease that has nothing performed left in it because there's finally nothing underneath the ease that needs hiding. They stop auditioning. Not because they no longer care what others think, but because they've finally met the person others' opinions used to substitute for. This is not the end of the mask entirely. Jung was clear that some persona remains necessary. A professional will still need a professional bearing. A parent will still need a parental steadiness. The difference is subtle but total. The mask becomes a tool you pick up deliberately instead of a face you forgot you were wearing. You put it on. You know you're the one doing it. And when the room empties, you take it off and there's someone still standing there. That is the part most people never get to experience. Not because it's impossible, but because it requires a willingness to meet whatever exists behind the performance, unflattering parts included, before you can trust that something is actually there. Somewhere right now, someone is being praised for a version of themselves that costs them everything to maintain, and thanked for a warmth that was never actually free. They will go home and feel the particular exhaustion of a performance well received, and they will call this exhaustion normal because they have never known anything else long enough to compare it to. This is what the mask asks in exchange for its protection, not honesty, which it forbids, not rest, which it cannot afford, only continuity, the same face, the same tone, the same manageable version of a person, offered again and again to rooms that never once asked what it cost to produce. Jung spent a long career studying what happens to people who never question this arrangement, and what he found was not villainy. It was something quieter and more common, a slow erosion of the capacity to know one's own experience, replaced by a highly refined capacity to know everyone else's expectations instead. Most people call this maturity. It is closer to a form of exile, conducted from inside one's own life. The mask was never your enemy. It did what it was built to do, and for a long time, it may have kept you safe in rooms that were not designed to hold the whole of you. There is no shame in having built it. The only question that remains is whether you intend to keep living entirely inside it, mistaking its face for your own, long after the rooms that required it have changed or disappeared or stopped mattering as much as you once believed they did. Somewhere behind every performance, someone is still waiting to be asked a single unglamorous question. Not who do people think you are? Who are you when no one is checking? Most people will spend their entire lives avoiding the answer, not because it's ugly, because once they find it, they can no longer pretend they didn't know.